I'm glad Luke has an idea about which Oklahoma team's going to show up this Saturday, because I don't have an idea. Let's discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Again, we got Locked On Bama's Jimmy Stein and Luke Robinson, Jay Smith, myself from Locked On Sooners. So guys, the Oklahoma Sooners are probably not the Oklahoma Sooners you expected coming into the season.
Right. Those offensive, it's not the Oklahoma Sooners y'all expected to see, and y'all know the depth chart. Y'all know the lineup as well as any Oklahoma guys out there, and it's not the lineup y'all expected to see. Jay was telling me before we were off the air, this is something like y'all's 10th different iteration on the offensive line. You're down at some point this season, I know, 5 wide receivers that y'all expected to play. And then of course switching out the quarterbacks. What a mess, but not of your own making. It just from afar, it looks like a mulligan to me. Like you just can't compete with that level of injury situation.
Yeah, we're walking in like we have a large CVS receipt of injuries, right? As everybody knows, those things are ginormously long, and we just got lucky this year. It literally is a situation where bad luck meets the schedule we talked about in the last session. I was in the last segment. I was talking to a buddy of mine about that when we came into the season, because the biggest question around Oklahoma was at offensive line. We lost 4 guys to the draft, and we lost 4 guys to the portal, which were more your older players. So we were playing a lot of younger guys. So we portaled in some new ones, and he was telling me, he was like, man, I have questions around your line. Can Bill Beatonbow figure this out? And I was like, well, I expect him to figure it out in time, but the only thing that's going to save these young quarterbacks, because we have a true sophomore quarterback who only has like 5 starts, is going to be that we have wide receivers he can throw to that are veteran, that they'll be able to take some of the pressure away, right? When you have a really good wide receiver room and a mediocre quarterback, the wide receivers somehow catch random passes that are thrown in their direction no matter what at college. That's just the game. Well, we didn't get that either. So when you get all the wide receivers gone, when you get the entire offensive line, basically, like I said, this week will be our 10th iteration of the offensive line in 11 games. And we've gone through 4 centers. We've gone through roughly 3 to 4 tackles. Left guard, I think, has seen like 4 or 5 different configurations. Only consistent piece has been the right guard in Fabichi Wewu. He's a transfer from North Texas. And he's had his ups and downs, but he's literally the only one that's played every game this season. So it's going to be fun to see which version of Oklahoma shows up this weekend.
Yeah, it's funny, though. Oklahoma does have a pretty solid win on their resume over Tulane. But it seems a little funky to say, but Tulane may end up being the representative from the group of 5 in this. Now, I know you'll throw your head, but they're not awful. And you beat them 34-19. It wasn't like you just barely did it, but your injury luck is certainly kind of crazy. You hope it never happens again. And the problem with once a big injury happens, it seems like it starts to snowball sometimes, because you do move pieces around who aren't used to being in those particular positions. And then maybe they get hurt. And boy, next thing you know, it is a domino effect like you can't believe.
You're playing guys who aren't ready to play. Just because they're on the team doesn't mean they're ready to play. I mean, it's college. It's a developmental sport. It's a developmental age. You're playing guys that are a year or 2 away from being ready. It's just and it just kind of multiplies from there.
And I really thought
starting to see some guys that are actually developing. They've played Logan Howland and Heath Ozida at left tackle, left guard the last few weeks, and it was a rough go of it against Ole Miss, against a really, really, really good Ole Miss defensive front. And people were ready to throw the left tackle in the boat and cast him off the sea. But then he's gotten better. He got better against Maine. He was better against Missouri, and he's continuing to develop. It's just these pieces weren't expected to be a part of the equation for 2024. But yet here we are. We're relying on them, and they're getting better little by little. Now it's going to be fun to see how they continue to develop against Alabama.
Boy, I have no problem saying this. Jackson Arnold, I thought he was going to be a problem for everybody. Now, he may eventually be, and you don't want to just give up on him. He's still young. But I'm saying I expected so much more because, Oklahoma's earned that reputation to just putting quarterback after quarterback in the league, winning Heisman Trophy winners, and but it just hadn't come to fruition. Now, part of that is because you're missing a lot of your wide receivers, you're missing a lot of offensive linemen, and so that sort of throws off everything. I suspect, assuming he's still there next year and assuming that he wins the job, that we'll see a much better version of Jackson Arnold next year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that was the one thing that we kind of learned about him and a little bit about the true freshman, Michael Hawkins, is that they're not guys that when everything falls apart, they'll just figure it out on their own. It feels like they have a little bit of PTSD because with the line, with the way things had to shift in situations where you got to play an injured guy because somebody else gets injured a little bit worse, that you'll see a free rusher come at you and boom, you immediately cower down. And that's no shade to them. It's more so it's a learning experience. This game moves fast, especially as you get further into the SEC. You're going against some of the top players and the guys that will most likely end up in the league. So that's getting you to that top 1% of the top 1%. So for them, it's now the adjustment period of you've gone through this multiple times. You get an understanding that sometimes you're going to see ghosts and sometimes they are ghosts. And so don't look at them as they're real people. So look at them as ghosts and keep staying focused and throw it. And hopefully that's the thing we see with Jackson Arnold. Because you're right. We all thought that he was going to be just keep the party going. But when you have that many circumstances pile up on top of each other, no quarterback can typically survive it unless they're just like a gamer. Like I got to kind of give it to DJ Lagway over there at, Florida. They were looking like they were just letting people walk by in the offensive line at one point. And he figured out how to get it and things got comfortable. But to John's point, I think that's the one thing I appreciate about the offensive line. It's week over week, they're showing better. Then an injury happens, but then week over week, they get a little bit better. So hopefully the health and the experience of getting beat up the last 10 weeks will show up this week, and we can able to keep this game nice and close, because the big question now is, if the offense can just keep the ball long enough, what can our defense really do against Jalen Milroe?
Yeah, and we got to talk about that. But, when you talked about Florida, it made me think, I think the SEC missed so many golden opportunities in scheduling this year.
Oh, yeah.
Number one, and I've said this over and over again, Auburn not playing Ole Miss is bananas to me. The Hugh Freeze, Lane Kiffin dynamic, all of that stuff. And they're going head-to-head for some guys in Mississippi right now, recruiting-wise. I think that is such a natural – I mean, no matter how bad Auburn is this year or, if Ole Miss had been doing poorly, that game would have been must-watch. I think Oklahoma, Florida, with the fact that y'all played national championships against one another. And if you look – this is hindsight, but you guys are in a very similar situation. Like, both coaches are sort of fighting to win back the fan bases. Billy Napier's, sort of taking the lead on that, I would say, right now. But, boy, wouldn't it be interesting if y'all had even two true freshman quarterbacks going at it against one another to try and win your fan bases over. And I also said Alabama and Mississippi State just for geography. Y'all may not know this. Those are the two closest SEC schools to one another. And we played them just about more than anybody. So I don't understand.
Well, y'all have 12 game streak or something like that of playing with each other? Something in that ridiculous number?
We've played Mississippi State more than we've played any other team, including Auburn and Tennessee.
It's stupid not to do that. And I know that you're saying, well, you won't just want an easy win. But it's at the same time, it's such a great, easy trip to go to. You know how hard it is to get to Texas A&M? You got to have a blimp.
And you got to go to College Station. I mean, even once you get there, it's rough going. I felt the same thing about Oklahoma, Arkansas. I'm actually closer to Fayetteville than I am to Norman. So that would have been a natural one. But
it's a natural rival.
Yeah. Eventually we'll get all these, and it's going to be hard to get all of these SEC games in. But and sorry for disrupting the party. In the SEC with Oklahoma and Texas coming in. So many natural rivalries getting kind of tossed aside for a couple of years.
Well, I think it's great.
We'll dig it.
It's made it
unquestionably. It's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, we're getting this week.
It's unquestionably the best conference.
Yeah, it's been 21 years since we've gotten Oklahoma, Alabama in a regular season game. And, and we get Alabama in Norman in a game that matters a ton as they try to maintain their college football playoff lives here down the stretch. How's this game going to go? What does Oklahoma's defense got to do? How can Alabama's offense overcome Oklahoma's defense? Let's discuss coming up next.